Dobar ден, почитувани гледачи. Денеска е 23 јануари 2016, а ова е емисијата Македонско издание, која што се емитува секоја втора сабота во 12:30 часот попладне на Роджерс телевизија, каналите 10, 63 и во High Definition 510. Јас сум Победа Пискачева, уредникот и водителот на оваа ваша програма, која што ве информира и забавува веќе 18 години. И во оваа година Македонско издание ќе продолжи да влегува во вашите домови и да ви ја доближува вашата татковина Македонија до вашите срца во Канада. Секако, за тоа да се одвива континуирано и непопречено, потребна ни е вашата помош и поддршка. Затоа апелираме да ги рекламирате вашите бизниси на оваа телевизиска програма, која влегува во 4 милиони претплатнички домови во Онтарио. Втората лидершип конференција на Generation M при Обединетата македонска диаспора, како што информиравме во претходните емисии, се одржа на 7 ноември на Универзитетот на Торонто. Во оваа емисија ќе ви прикажеме дел од една од презентациите на членовите на Generation M, кои покажаа висока спремност и професионалност, иако се во своите рани 20 години.
The basics, how global events have shaped social media, how social media has shaped them, how they hit home, our diaspora. We'll have a little bit of fun, and then I'll open up for discussion for questions and answers. My handle for pretty much all social media is Filip Yokarski. I'm a marketing major at the University of Cincinnati, and as Mario mentioned before, we work at a company called Kinetic Solutions, where I'm the director of social media there. And I'm an avid fan of Norm Kelly, which he's, I think it's Toronto native. He's a counselor for Ward 40, I believe, and pretty much a huge celebrity on Twitter. Passionate Snapchatter and founder of a selfie stick in DC. We had a great time in Macedonia this summer with it. So the basics, the global millennial takeover. As you can see with this graph, you guys can read it. Millennials, our generation is growing. By 2025, 2030, we'll be the majority, and that's only 10, 15 years from now. Currently, we're at 2.3 billion of the world, and we also share content the most, and this is 60% of our generation compared to any other generation, obviously the majority. And that majority has helped shape the world. And I'm going to kind of open it up a little bit and quiz you guys. Who can give me kind of a good description of the Arab Spring that happened in 2010 to 2013? It's such a cliche example of social media and world events, but who wants to go ahead and give a nice explanation of that? Take it, anybody?
Yeah, sure. The way I understand it, in late 2010, it was an incident in Tunisia actually. A young man was arrested for selling fruit illegally at a street, and he was actually taken to jail and actually beaten by the cops to death. And this just created a whole widespread ripple effect of people saying, like, this is absolutely ridiculous, our governments can't do this to us, we have rights, we're human beings, we have universal rights. And social media is what diffused all of it. All the protests, all the gatherings were part of social media, and Philip will pretty much go into that, but huge lasting effects from it, just from one event.
And that was a spark that set off the fire. And like you said, social media has led to the topplings of multiple governments. Some of those topplings have been positive, some negative, and we're still feeling the effects today with the migrant crisis. The next example is the Japan earthquake in 2011, which, if not for social media, many lives would have been lost. Facebook and Google had programs called, for example, People Finder, which help relatives post where they are on Facebook because they still had power on their mobiles to alert their family members or relatives. The next was, obviously, everybody remembers Kony 2012. It was kind of an overnight sensation, a YouTube video, which increase the popularity of one African warlord. Some people call it spam, some not. However, just the spread of that is just astounding. One video, I'm sure you had an opinion of it when it came out. The next example of Je suis Charlie in Paris, when at the beginning of the year, terrorists attacked a publishing headquarters and unfortunately killed multiple people. The support that company had was astounding. The whole world poured their support back to them, and over social media, over Twitter, the hashtag Je suis Charlie was pretty much the only hashtag you saw. And in Venezuela, does anybody know what happened in Venezuela or what's currently happening just last year? Nobody? Well, I mean, basically it's the government that took over after Hugo Chavez passed away. Very corrupt government, and it was state-controlled media, so the citizens of Venezuela had no information outside of social media on the other side of the story. With Twitter, with Facebook, some of these actions by the government wouldn't have seen the light of day. And it's a current crisis taking place, which leads to, in the US, my own country, the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm sure most people, since it's an only neighboring country, you guys have heard of it. And I can give a personal example. At my university, we had an incident just last week where a group called the Irate 8, which represented 8% of African American population at my school, had recommendations for the university. They held like a blackout day to show support for the police brutality that's been happening these past few years. And through a social media site called Yik-Yak, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with it, but it's basically you can post anything anonymously, anything you want. There have been extremely racist comments posted on that, which led to arrests, which it really isn't anonymous, so just a warning there. It was a huge story on campus that was shaped by social media.
На Leadership конференцијата на Generation M, која се одржа во организација на Обединетата македонска дијаспора, беше разговарано и за ситуацијата со бегалците од Сирија. Своje mišljenje vo vrska со ова дадоа познати академци и во ова емисија сакаме да ви пренесеме дел од нивните коментари.
The migrant crisis, as you all know, is something that has taken the world by storm, to say the least. So we wanted to add it into this discussion because of its importance both to the conversation and, of course, to the Southeast countries, specifically Macedonia and Serbia. The migrant crisis that's currently occurring in Europe has to do with the fact that Syrian people have been displaced, and their reaction to that has been to leave Syria and head towards Western Europe, specifically Germany in the case that we're dealing with here today. What that has caused is a somewhat interesting dilemma within Europe, specifically between Western and Eastern European countries, given that the Southeast European countries are acting as transit countries, simply allowing the migrants to pass through in order to get to the places where they want to go, such as the UK and Germany as an example. The problem has become that nobody has expected this to be such a massive amount of migrants. The magnitude is something that Germany simply cannot deal with. So where we stand right now is a problem which has no solution. And that's what makes it so interesting, is that for the first time in the history of at least the world that I remember, are we able here in Canada, in Toronto, halfway across the world, able to discuss solutions to an issue which has yet to be resolved. This has been allowed due to popular media because we get an insight into what's actually happening over there. So for those of you that follow newspaper articles, The Economist, whatever it may be, this issue has taken front page for the last actually very long while. The Economist has shifted from calling Chancellor Merkel a hero to calling her a hypocrite to calling her confused to back to a hero. What I'm trying to say here is that we're dealing with an ongoing issue. And why I'm saying that is that we have to give our panelists slack. They're going to be trying to answer questions which are very difficult to answer. Hindsight is always 20/20. We're dealing with something that's ongoing. Matt, from your perspective, how would you say the media has has constructed the discourse of this crisis? Has it been positive or negative? Do you think there's a lot of bias in some of the reports? And what does that mean for people here in North America who rely on this information to get an understanding of stuff?
Well, first of all, I'm really honored to be on this panel with Chris and Brenda. I think much more experts and authorities on a lot of these issues. But I think first we should reframe probably as, you refer to it as the migrant crisis. And I actually prefer to call it the refugee crisis. And the reason why, I think this is one of the reasons of where the media has come into play, and maybe Chris can touch on this from a human rights legal perspective. These people are refugees up until a certain point, right? And throughout Macedonia, they're refugees, and they get, the transit countries that you referred to, and Greece and Macedonia, Serbia onwards. They don't necessarily become migrants until they actually, put, their feet on the ground and seek asylum. And fortunately, Macedonia hasn't received that many migrant or asylum applications. I think it's around 50 or so that I've heard of. Serbia, probably about 500. Greece, very minimal as well. And probably, those countries like Austria, Germany, Sweden, and others are receiving the other, or the brunt of these refugees. And so, recently I participated in a panel and actually some of and then every country has a different way of identifying them, whether they're refugees or migrants. Turkey calls them displaced persons, and other countries. And so this is where the media definitely plays a part in educating the public on the proper terminology. I think first and foremost, and then so there's no misunderstandings. And then also, what I've noticed, it's been framed in the religious context. And so a lot of these migrants or refugees, believe it or not, are not Muslim. There's a large portion that are Christian as well, and so I think it's not like just Muslims and how some of the media has portrayed that perhaps this could be a terrorist threat, to these countries. And yes, there could be that component, and yes, there are aspects of ISIS and other non-constructive, detrimental to the societies where they may go. But I would say that, we again, the media plays, and social media plays a key role in making sure that the proper information is going out there. And then obviously all the people on the ground. I think those are the largest voices for this crisis. And so, you have the situation with the tear gas in Macedonia. And Chris probably will touch on this, but the first thing that I wanted to do is get to the bottom of this, because all of a sudden on social media, you see these pictures and videos of Macedonia firing tear gas on these people that are carrying children, and running for their lives and things like that, away from an oppressive. And yeah, you can talk about the reasons of why Syria and the region are, the way they are right now. But Macedonia and other countries are obviously not responsible for this. But I try to get to the bottom, and the first outlet I contact is actually the U.S. Embassy, and I said, "What's going on?" From your perspective, and then I contact the Macedonian Embassy, "What's going on?" And they said it wasn't tear gas, actually. It was stun bombs that I guess in a way let out this smoke, and so it wasn't tear gas. It wasn't on purpose. And then the other thing that I noticed is how Macedonian police apparently were treating these migrants, and I saw this in the various Twitter posts and Facebook and other ways. And so they were saying that Macedonian police officers were beating and whatnot these refugees. And yes, there are aspects of, Macedonia wasn't accustomed none of these countries were accustomed to welcoming. I mean, in the beginning of the summer, Macedonia was welcoming about 300 a day. Then it grew to 500, to 1,000, to 3,000, to 7,000, to now 10,000 a day refugees crossing the border. And so the border control, the police don't have the resources nor the manpower to sustain such a big problem.
There have been a lot of rumors and reports of certain problems with human rights and how the refugees have been treated, not just in the southeast countries of Macedonia and Serbia, but on their journey from Syria into Western Europe. Now, this is a very large area and a very difficult question to answer, or to even try to begin to understand. So I want to pose a question to Mr. Pellier and say, based on what you've read and what you know, and you're already giving me the look, how would you say that Macedonia and Serbia, the transit countries, have dealt with the human rights issue specific to how they've been dealing with the migrants or refugees?
It's obviously difficult from this perspective of living in Toronto to do anything than to appreciate what the media says. But I must say that it caused me a great sense of embarrassment to read about the way in which Macedonia was treating the refugees. In my view, we should have been embracing them. We should have assisted them. You've got to remember, if you look back historically, my grandparents, many of your grandparents or parents, fled regimes that were oppressive. And that's what these people are doing. And that they came to the United States or Canada and they weren't necessarily welcomed with wide open arms, but they also weren't abused in the way in which the refugees were in Macedonia. And I would have thought that as a country that has suffered human rights abuses, its people have suffered human rights abuses and continue to, certainly in that portion of Macedonia currently occupied by Greece, that they would understand and appreciate in a much better sense the way in which these refugees can and should have been treated. And so, beatings, Meto says it wasn't tear gas, it was some kind of a stun bomb or whatever it was called that he used. I didn't get the phrase. It doesn't matter. It's offensive, and that we ought to be there to assist them in that journey. And it's the religious part of it that I find troublesome as well. That is that I would bet that the majority of the people in Macedonia would view this as a Muslim issue. I just say it should play no role whatever in assisting these refugees. And the fact that it happens to be that many of them are Christian ought to be irrelevant. It shouldn't be about religion. It should be about assisting these people, many of whom are family people who are leaving with their children. Many of the individuals are well educated, many of whom I've heard interviewed on CBC who speak perfectly good English. They ought to be assisted as opposed to treated in the way they have. So from a human rights perspective, it's offensive. Our country ought to be a leader as opposed to being part of the problem, from my perspective.
The most recent reports actually have been saying that there's a lot of tension between Western Europe, being Germany, and Eastern Europe, sort of the countries that we're speaking about here, in terms of how they're dealing with the refugee crisis. Germany is taking on an incredible amount of refugees under their wing, while the other countries are saying we simply will not. That has created a lot of tension and rumors that this could break up the Schengen zone. And the Schengen zone is a group of countries which have within Europe, and it's not equivalent to the European Union. It's a group of countries which just simply put down the borders and allow for people to freely move throughout Europe without the need for border control. Now, breaking up, this has been around for some time, and breaking up the Schengen zone would create a lot of problems. But what I want to focus on here, given that we have an expert in civil engineering, is the cost that it would be from a physical infrastructure perspective to actually completely break up the Schengen zone and go back to having completely separated borders. If you could, Brenda, if you could answer that question. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I don't know, I mean, you're talking about an extreme of breaking it down entirely.
Exactly.
But there are many midpoints between its complete implementation and its complete demise. And I think what they're talking about is providing a temporary crisis situation, which is part of the agreement, that they can close their borders for a short period of time until they're able to come back to some steady state that would allow them to continue to allow refugees into the country. Is it feasible? Well, it's going to have an impact, of course, on the local economy within the country because it's going to slow down the goods and the people from being able to cross the borders. It will have an economic impact because businesses will be impacted, just as if the border between Canada and the U.S. Started being closed again, there would be impacts on our ability to go back and forth. We've been very lucky to have things, agreements with the U.S. that allow us to cross over and allow goods to cross while we're trying to increase our border crossings to the Far East and other countries and other places around the world. This obviously will have an impact, but I think in the case of Germany, they feel that they need that break to be able to take a breath, get the immigrants and the refugees that they are hoping to place and make safe and give them a place and have them integrate into their societies, take a breath and allow that to happen before the next wave. So is it possible? Yes. Is it feasible? Probably in the short term without having the entire zone break down. But this is the first major test of that zone, and so I think it's going to have some hiccups along the way.
Thank you.
И во денешната емисија имаме неколку информации. За сите ваши прослави и одбележувања користите ги банкет салите во црквата Свети Климент Охридски во Торонто. За информации и резервации јавете се на 416-421-7451. Канадското македонско место во Торонто е пензионерски дом кој ви обезбедува угодно и хармонично живење. За повеќе информации побарете ја Златка на 416-755-9231. За професионално и поволно дизајнирање на вебсајтови побарајте ги TJ Hosting на 647-547-3061. И секако читајте македонски вести сега и со детални информации и важни надписи за македонската комуна во Торонто. За сите врсти на животно осигурување, осигурување за критични болести, осигурување на вашиот кредит за куќа, инвалидско и здравствено осигурување и осигурување кога патувате, јавете се на 647-977-0233. Ние ќе ви помогнеме да го одберете најповолното и најдоброто осигурување за вас. Во денешнава емисија имаме и едно известување. Организацијата Обединети македонци од Канада ја организира 44-та комитска вечер на 6 февруари годинава во големата сала на Македонската православна црква Свети Климент Охридски. Специјални гости од Македонија ќе бидат Миленко Неделковски, политички аналитичар и новинар, и Спасен Силјановски, интерпретатор на македонски песни во фолклорен дух. Исто така, ќе ве забавува и оркестарот Децата од Буф. За резервации и информации јавете се во Организацијата Обединети македонци на телефон 416-876-7140. Музикорама, концерти и ора, директно од Лерин, Егејска Македонија, во организација на црквата Свети Наум од Охрид од Хамилтон. Наступувањата ќе се одржат на 13 февруари годинава во Хамилтон, 20 февруари во Торонто и на 21 февруари во Уиндзор. Дојдете и забавувајте се во наведениве македонски православни цркви во овие градови во Онтарио. За резервации и информации испратете имейл на stnaumhamilton@gmail.com. Ете, почитувани гледачи, тоа е се што подготвивме за оваа 370-та емисија на македонско издание, која можете да ја следите и на интернет на www.macedonianedition.tv. До 6 февруари 2016 година, кога повторно ќе се видиме со нова емисија, ви благодарам за вашето ценито внимание, пријатно и довидување.
No